Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and speech writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by Marybeth Bentwood. We will be discussing generating media coverage. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Marybeth, welcome to the show.
Good day, Bruce. How are you?
I am fine, thank you, and I hope you are as well.
Yes.
Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Thank you. I am a strategic media expert. I help entrepreneurs tell their story in a way that generates media coverage and gets them visible to their target client. I help big brands, I help small brands. I'm an advocate for entrepreneurs, really of all sizes. I'm especially passionate about entrepreneurs that are purpose driven, that have a mission, that they are passionate about communicating and a problem they want to solve.
I can remember years ago reading an editorial. I think it was Inc. magazine. It may have been Fast Company, but that doesn't matter. The editor wrote that, I think at the time it was a he, received X number of pitches every day, and they all went into spam.
Yeah.
And that you don't pitch to an editor or producer because it's a waste of time. You have to know somebody, or you let them pitch to you through a website like helpareporter.com, which I have used with great success. I've been quoted in over 750 articles that have appeared in more than 550 publications.
Congratulations.
Thank you. How do you advise clients to get PR?
A great question.
Uh-huh.
First, the Help a Reporter Out is a really great resource that I think anybody listening to this should know about. And you can find it at helpareporter.com.
Right.
Its short version is Harrow, H-A-R-O-W, or O, and that comes out 3 times a day. And it is a great place to respond to journalists that are looking for experts. That said, it's a lot like trying to get a sip of water from a fire hydrant. You tend to be soaking wet and thirsty afterwards. There's so much volume coming out in those 3 emails a day that you have to be really strategic in how you go about, filtering it. And then you need to be ready to go and have your media bio succinct so that you pounce when you see an opportunity. You have used it. You could do a whole, episode on how to leverage Harrow. Because I think a lot of people get turned off now because there's just so much information coming out there. But to your
It's
listeners,
really not 3 times. It's 3 times a day.
Yeah.
But in my case, it's 3 emails, so that's 9 emails a day on every conceivable topic.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot. But you're using it really well. So first of all, you're right that editors will tell me that they receive around 500 pitches a week. So you can imagine we already all suffer from, inbox overload. I had one editor say that their inbox was like a war zone. They didn't want to go anywhere near it. And so then imagine all of these unknowns pitching you. So the first thing I say is target freelancers. Freelancers are really hungry. They're getting paid for as many stories as they place. If you can find a freelancer who has a track record of telling stories like yours, they're probably a better bet if you want to get one of those bigger outlets, or really any kind of outlet. That's one. Two, when you are pitching someone, your subject line, I mean, that's your knock on the door. Your subject line needs to be hyper relevant to them, or there needs to be an emotional call to action that really triggers an emotional response that makes your email stand out. Because that's all you have is that subject for someone to open it. If they do open it, you also want to have a really succinct reason of why you're contacting them and what problem you're solving by bringing the story to them. What I would tell any entrepreneur that is just trying to get their name out there is obviously you want to start with a contributor article, start with offering contributor pieces to podcasts, just so you start having a framework for who you are. But you need to start cultivating relationships with these thought leaders, with the editors, with the writers, with the freelancers. And you can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on social media. You can do that on Twitter. I always encourage my clients to share content that they think offers value from writers that they want to work with. And you can't do it in a manipulative way. You need to share it in a way that makes sense and offers value to your readers. But those writers then see that you're paying attention to them, so that 3 months from now, when you want to pitch something, they've already seen your name come up on one of these social platforms.
Two things.
Sure.
First, you said big outlets. Now, using HARO, I've been the Wall Street Journal, U.S. News and World Report, the U.S. News and World Report, USA Today, the big guys. I've also been on websites, quoted on blogs, websites that nobody has ever heard of.
Yep.
Ironically, I've gotten more traction to my website from these little no name, no nothing blogs than from the Wall Street Journal.
That's fascinating.
So when I'm on HARO, I don't care what the outlet is because I don't know what the readership is. And as soon as I get quoted, and of course they never tell you or rarely ever tell you, so I Google myself. When I find the link, I put it on my website.
Yes.
And then to your point, I will connect or I will share it for sake of argument on LinkedIn, and I will put thanks to @Marybeth Bentwood and for a great article, even if I don't think it's great, but they spelled my name right, which makes it a great article. And then you're absolutely correct. It may be a week later, maybe a month later. In some cases, it's a year later.
Yeah.
They contact me directly and they say, maybe you remember. Who remembers? What do I care? It's going to be more press.
Yes. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions when people want to get press coverage for themselves is they don't recognize that you need to develop a relationship with journalists, with producers, with thought leaders. And that relationship doesn't have to be a big, profound one, but it starts by being reliable, being consistent, giving them exactly what you said you're going to give them before the deadline and exceeding it so that you can stand out above the average. And they say, you know what? I really liked working with Bruce because he got me everything I needed before my deadline. I'm going to go back to him. I've got a story that he might be a fit for.
And don't pitch them.
Yeah. No, you show up solving a problem that they need. And then 3-4 times from there, when you do want to pitch them, they may respond to you saying, you know what, Bruce, love that story. It's not a fit for me. It is a fit for my wife. Let me forward it to her. Now you've got somebody advocating for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's relationships, and it doesn't mean that you can't get press if you don't have relationships. You just need to be mindful that every single person you're emailing, that's a person. It's not just an email. And go, find out as much as you can. Stalk in the least scary way possible to understand who that person is, you don't want to pitch someone if you've never read anything they've written. And just because they've written one article that is about your area of expertise doesn't mean that's always what they write about. Maybe that's the one-off. So when you approach that writer, you need to give some context that shows you've done your homework. I always say, think about someone calling you for a favor. Or take that back. Let's go to LinkedIn. How many people on LinkedIn reach out to you in your messages pitching you something? How many a day? Do any of those people ever say, hey, Bruce, I listened to your podcast. It's amazing. I really love the episode where you interviewed that publicist. In fact, I followed some of your advice and I got some press coverage. I was wondering if you could help me with this staffing issue in my company. I was wondering if you would consider, all of a sudden, you're all ears. Nobody ever does that. And that's critical when you're pitching someone.
Let's change the focus a bit, because we've been talking about press, meaning print.
Yeah.
Let's talk about television.
All right.
I was always advised, you
Okay.
start off small. You
Yep.
get the local, around here, it's Channel 12, which is the local news on cable that no one watches. And if you make a fool out of yourself, it's not the end of the world. You got a little experience, you learn from it, and then you work your way up. And not meaning to pat myself on the back, I don't know why I was good at it, but the first time I was on local television, I didn't make a fool out of myself. I only made a fool out of myself once. I think there must have been something in the air, because the interviewer asked me a silly question and I answered it in a silly way, and she started to laugh and I started to laugh, and then I threatened her that if there was ever a blooper reel, I would come after her. It was fine. But that gave me the experience that got me onto the local broadcast stations and ultimately nationally.
Yep.
And when I arrived at the Fox studios for the national broadcast, all the time I was thinking, I can't say to myself, no one's watching this. There are millions of people watching it, but the minute the cameras went on, that red light went on, I forgot all about that. And I was just talking to the interviewer. So that was my experience. But people have come to me and said, look, how did you do it? And I explained to them how I did it. And I tell them that they've got to find a way to, and I help them with it, to be calm and to appear to be professional, and everything they're concerned about is silly. What they should be concerned about is something else. And it seems to help. What advice do you give to people to get onto the local Channel 12, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way,
Not at all.
television?
Tell them to call you, because I think you've nailed it. So always start local when it comes to broadcast, and not just because that's the place where you want to practice being on air. It also is going to give you a reel. And when you are going after national, they want to see that you can do local. They want to know, how does he perform when the cameras are on? What's his energy like? Can he string together a sentence? Is he fast on his feet? Is he really self-conscious? Is he engaging? Is it entertaining? Does he bring something to the table that the viewers are going to watch? Is it good TV? Right? That's what they're worried about. And they're also worried about if you know your stuff. But when you go on a national level, they're talking to a bunch of experts. So if they choose you, it's also because you bring something dynamic to the table. And you call up the news station. You ask for the news desk. And you share the opportunity with them, asking, what I do with my clients is I ask really short. I say, do you have 1 minute to hear a good news story? And then I pitch the news story, and I pitch it in a way that tells a story. So I usually have a real feel good, charitable, give back, big thing. The protagonist of the story, right? There's some heartfelt something that's happening, and the client's a part of it. So I had 3 students that were walking from Mount Washington in New Hampshire to the coast this winter, and it was to raise awareness of how outdoor activity increases mental wellness, well-being. Well, day 1 of this 3-day, 108-mile walk, a historic blizzard took place. So now there were 4 characters, right? The 3 students and this massive, massive blizzard. So I was teaching them how to pitch themselves to the media. And we pitched it as how they overcame this. We had incredible footage, and they ran it. It ran on 3 different stations. I've done the same with other clients that have done charitable givebacks. A mask company, Rafi Nova in Boston, was giving hundreds of thousands of masks away, and started by giving them to, this is way back in April of last year, to fire stations, police departments, homeless shelters. So they were really serving a need that at that time wasn't being met. And you want to think about visuals, right? TV is really visual. What's the visual part of the story? And I always tell my clients, you have to think about how the viewer is going to put the story together in their mind, because that's what it does. So you've got to put those pieces together when you're pitching it to the producer. And there's also a saying now that is, if it's shareable, it's airable. So if you're getting a lot of traction on social media for some content that you created, that also might grab media attention. It's also a really good context to look at what drives viewership. And if you want to be on media a lot, you want to be a talking head, you want to be an expert, you should start sharing your opinions on social, doing lives, talking about, if you are a communications expert or a body language expert, the summit yesterday with Putin and Biden, easily go in there, take some clips of that and say, you know what, I noticed some male dominant, behavior here. I noticed some, struggling for dominance here. Just really nailing what it is you're seeing that supports your area of expertise, and sharing that with your viewers, so that when there is an opportunity for you to add to that conversation on a national level, you can share that as proof of your expertise. You can also then see all the comments underneath it, and that producer knows that you bring an audience to the table.
And it doesn't matter if the comments are positive or negative, because the producer only cares about having a good show.
Yeah.
My favorite example was an interview that Mike Wallace gave or had with Mel Brooks on 60 Minutes. And it's hysterical. And he says that the minute the camera was turned on, Mel Brooks turned into Mel Brooks. And he said to him, how much did you pay for your watch? And he said, $30, whatever. And Brooks says, well, you're a wealthy man. Why are you only paying $30? Blah, 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 blah. He never had control, Mike Wallace, over the interview. And then he said something that I remembered. He said, it didn't matter. The purpose of the program was to entertain. And if you can educate, because it was Mel Brooks, if you can educate, fine, but the purpose was to entertain, and it was entertaining, which meant it was a good interview, regardless of who had control. Yes. Nothing bad happened. It's and like, I am not the star of this interview. You are.
And you know who you invited to the table. You invited Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
That speaks for itself. Of course, he's going to run the tables on you.
Sure. And if you didn't know that, you shouldn't have, then something's wrong.
Yes.
But we've done press, we've done television. Let's end with the one I don't like, which is radio. And the reason I don't like radio, not
Yeah.
podcast,
Yeah.
radio, traditional terrestrial radio,
Yeah.
because of the commercials. You start talking and you have your flow, and then now I know how to speak in sound bites on television because I expect to be cut off. I know I only have 2 minutes, which may be 10% of the program, which is a lot of time. But when you're invited on radio and it's a half-hour show, sometimes you're not aware of the fact that there are X number of commercials,
Yeah.
and they're going to be interrupting you.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for people about radio? Is it worth it? Do people listen to the radio today? And secondly, if you're on radio, how do you manipulate or maneuver, I should say, between the commercials?
This is a tricky one for me to answer, Bruce.
Good.
Because I only pay attention to really specific radio now. And my clients are not driving traffic back to their business through radio. Podcast, yes. TV, absolutely. Editorial coverage, magazines, newspapers, yes. Blogs, yes. Radio, precisely because of these commercials, is harder and harder. My clients have been on NPR, on a couple of different programs on there, and they've absolutely seen an uptick. And I think also for a station like that, they get a lot of authority and credibility out of it. But it's not an area that I focus on for them. I'm going to be really honest. It is just not an area that I think lends itself anymore to really building authority and credibility. So I don't feel like I can answer that in an expert kind of way. What I'd like to counter with is I would suggest, instead of going after radio, go after speaking opportunities. So
you include speaking opportunities under the rubric of PR.
Oh my God, of course, a TEDx talk, a speaker, even speaking at your local chamber of commerce, speaking, getting on panels, getting your name out there, whether it's in your specific industry or ancillary, is phenomenal. You automatically, if you're a good speaker, are going to be invited to speak at other conferences. Speaking, I think, is probably the most dynamic and exciting platform as a publicist, because a live audience, if you can inspire, motivate, have a call to action, and really connect with that audience, you have fans. You have fans that want to know more about you, that want to buy your book, want to listen to your podcast, want to sign up for your program. Live speaking opportunities are also higher stakes. And I like higher stakes for my clients because it's going to return at a higher level for them. And for that, I will say the most common habit I see that I would love for people to change is your audience makes a decision about whether they're going to listen to you or not in the first 15 seconds. Do not waste your time on thanking your host, on thanking the audience, on acknowledging this wonderful opportunity. Everybody does that. Go straight in to what it is you're here to do. And then you can thank the hosts. Jamie Oliver, the British chef, has a really great TED Talk. And he starts out, walks on that stage and says, in the next 18 minutes, the length it will take for this chat, 4 Americans are going to die because of the food that they eat. I'm Jamie Oliver. I'm a chef. And I'm combating childhood obesity. And then he goes on. And that's not an exact verbatim, but you get the intention. In that moment, you are listening because he has led with a statistic that we are going to experience in the next 18 minutes. So he set up this time construct and he's leading with his passion point of why he's there. So to me, I say, skip the radio shows, do podcasts, do print, do TV, and make yourself available as a speaker. Start off as a panelist for conferences. That is where you're going to get some traction. If you practice.
I could not agree with you more about the TED Talks and the TEDx talks. I've written now well over 200 speeches, and I used to start with, thank you for that kind introduction, thank you for inviting me to be here. And then I watched a TED Talk, and I don't remember whose it was. And they did what you described. And I said, that's a lot better than what I'm doing. And I changed it, and the response was the clients preferred it because they got it. They're still being polite.
Absolutely.
But they grab the attention of the audience. Now,
your job as a speaker is to take your audience somewhere.
That's right.
And I was working with a client who was running for a library board of trustees, which is actually an elected position. So she had to raise money and campaign. Yeah. And she came to me for help. And I looked at her speech. I said, this is fine. It's not memorable. It's not going to light any fires and, get you raising hands. And so I asked her, do you remember the first book you checked out? Do you? Because she talked about how the library was really important to her and she had all these great memories. And I said, maybe ask the audience, how old were you when you got your first library card? What's the first book you remember checking out of the library? How much was that first fine you got when you didn't bring it back on time? Everybody came up to her afterwards and said, oh my God, I hadn't thought about that in a million years. And she won the election by a landslide. So it is your job as a speaker to meet them where they are and take them where it is you want to go with them.
Well, if she comes back to you and tells you that she needs another speech to get reelected, many years ago in another life, I was a fundraiser. And I was hired by a library to write a grant proposal. And I was looking at literacy. And the head librarian came over to me and said, what do you think our most important task is? I said, making children love books. And she goes, no, preventing child abuse.
Wow.
And then she gave me the story, which you may not want to hear, but would make a very good speech.
Okay, Bruce, I'm going to be back in touch when she's up for re-election.
You got it. Now, Marybeth, before I let you go, I have one more question to ask you.
Okay.
And as I'm asking it, I'm putting up your contact information. And the question is what I ask all of my guests. Is there anything that I have not asked you that you wish I had asked you?
Tell me about the PR pocket rocket.
The PR pocket rocket?
Yes.
What, pray tell, is the PR pocket rocket?
The PR pocket rocket is a product that I have launched that supports entrepreneurs going after press coverage for themselves. So it is a quick workshop tutorial with templates and videos and access to me that helps them clarify their messaging, create their media bio, create their wish lists for media coverage, and then create a strategy that supports their pursuit of that. So it launches them into the media.
Well, I commend you for not coming up with another acronym, but rather a catchy name, because I personally despise acronyms. And more importantly, I thank you for coming on. I'm sure you've provided a wealth of information, and I'm sure all of our viewers will agree.
I hope so. Bruce, thank you for taking the time today. It was great to connect with you.
My pleasure. Thank you for watching. I'm Bruce Hurwitz, and as always, please keep focused on success.